Assalamu alaikum, Khawatin Hazrat. Welcome back. Salman, go ahead.
Welcome.
Hazrat, thank you. Forgive us for the little technical difficulty that we had. Jaise main arz kar raha tha, tonight is the Shahadat Majlis, the final Majlis for Bibi Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayh. اس سے پہلے کہ میں جناب ہاشم رضا صاحب کو دعوت دوں سولسا مرثیے کے لیے اگر اجازت ہو تو 4 مصرے ہیں ملاحظہ فرمائیے کہ اے مادر حسین مجھے منظور ہے سولی، اے مادر حسین مجھے منظور ہے سولی، میں نام تیرے قاتل کے چھپا نہیں سکتا. اے مادر حسین مجھے منظور ہے سولی، میں نام تیرے قاتل کے چھپا نہیں سکتا. بے خوف کرتا ہوں تیرے قاتل پہ لعنت، خوف کرتا ہوں تیرے قاتل پہ لعنت، اپنی نسلوں کو منافق میں بنا نہیں سکتا. اسی کے ساتھ میں درخواست گزار ہوں، دعوت دیتا ہوں جناب ہاشم رضا صاحب کو. ایک صلوات پڑھیے علی محمد و آل محمد.
اللہم
آل محمد.
السلام علیکم.
وعلیکم
السلام.
پیمبر سے جن کو کام نہیں ودائے آلے پیمبر سے جن کو کام نہیں وہ جی رہے ہیں مگر زندگی کا نام نہیں. وہ جی رہے ہیں مگر زندگی کا نام نہیں. زمانہ دیکھ لے تسبیح ہے عصمت زہرا. زمانہ دیکھ لے تسبیح ہے عصمت زہرا. بھلا وہ کون سا دانا ہے جو امام میں نہیں. ودائے
محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم.
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
سلام کے چند اشعار پیش کر دیتے ہیں. کلام ہے مرحوم مصطفیٰ جوہر صاحب کا، والد گرامی جناب طالب جوہری صاحب مرحوم. ایک دفعہ بآواز بلند نعرہ صلوات، ایک دفعہ اور صلی اللہ محمد.
تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ آیا ہے. تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ یعنی شرح عظمت نور پیمبر فاطمہ آیا تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ سے پھیلا دین حق ان سے بڑی نسل رسول ایک کوثر ہیں علی اور ایک کوثر فاطمہ ایک کوثر ہیں علی اور ایک کوثر فاطمہ تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ کشتی دین خدا کی ناخدا ثابت ہوئی شب رو شبیر جیسے دیکھ لنگر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ نام ہے تسبیح زہرا کام تسبیح خدا ذکر تیرا ذکر حق اللہ اکبر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ سن رہی ہیں گفتگوئے رب جبریل امین چادر تطہیر میں عرش بری پر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ زہر شبر کو دیا ٹکڑے جگر کے ہو گئے پھر گیا شبیر کی گردن پہ خنجر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کہتی ہے زبان حال سے کل عصمت مصطفیٰ اور اس کا جوہر فاطمہ کل عصمت مصطفیٰ اور اس کا جوہر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر کے مقصد کا محور فاطمہ یعنی شرح عظمت نور پیمبر فاطمہ آئے تطہیر محمد علیہ محمد
محمد وآل محمد
فاتحہ
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم
بار دیگر نعرہ صلوات
اللہم صلی علی محمد
وآل محمد
مریم سے بھی بطول کو رتبہ سوا ملا بابا اسے رسول سا خیر الورا ملا ہر بیٹا ہر ایک شہید رہے کہ خلق کا عقدہ کشا ملا شوہر ملا تو خلق کا عقدہ کشا ہر ایک اپنے مرتبے میں انتخاب ہے زہرا ہے بے مثال علی لاجواب زہرا ہے بے مثال علی لاجواب ہے کہتی تھی یاد کر کے نبی کو وہ نو گئے بابا تمہارے غم میں نے کیا مجھ کو در بدر بابا بطول ڈھونڈنے جائے تمہیں کدھر مدت ہوئی کہ آپ کی مجھ کو نہیں خبر مدت ہوئی کہ آپ کی مجھ کو نہیں یہ بہن کر کے فاطمہ جو غل مچاتی تھی آواز آ کے قبروں سے آتی آواز آ کے قبروں سے آتی تھی اس گفتگو سے اور بھی میں شرمایا بیٹوں سے پھر بطول نے رو کر کیا بیان پیارو ہمیشہ جیت نہیں ہے کسی کی ماں سوچو تو اپنے جی میں کہ نانا گئے کہاں سوچو تو اپنے جی میں کہ نانا گئے کہاں اماں نے سار خاک نہ سر پر اڑائیو مر جائے گی بطول تو غم تم نہ کھائیو مر جائے گی بطول تو غم تم نہ کھائیو بولے تمام آل محمد نے سر کے بعد ہو گئے حسین و حسن فاطمہ کلا میں کیا لکھوں جو زینب و کلثوم کا تاج مردے کے منہ سے ملتی تھی منہ کو بسد ملال مردے کے منہ سے ملتی تھی منہ کو بسد ملال فضا بھی لاش پاک پہ قربان جاتی تھی زہرا کے پاؤں آنکھوں سے رو لگاتی تھی زہرا کے پاؤں آنکھوں سے رو لگاتی تھی فرماتے ہیں علی ولی شاہ لا فتح زندگی تو فاطمہ کا کام رہا پر غسل میں نے میت زہرا کو جب دیا چاہا کہ اس کا جی کو کرو ہاتھ سے جدا چاہا کہ اس کا جی کو کرو ہاتھ سے جدا دل تنگ آخر ہو گیا مجھ دل ملول کا سیدھا ہوا نہ جناب بطول کا سیدھا ہوا نہ جناب بطول کا اس دم جناب شبر و شبیر نے گنا آئے وداع لاشے کو دل اپنا تھام تھا تب فاطمہ کے بندے کفن کھل گئے تمام نکلے کفن سے دستے بطول فلک مقام نکلے کفن سے دستے بطول فلک مقام کس درجہ چاہتی تھی یہ ہر ایک نور عین کو لپٹا لیا گلے سے حسن اور حسین لپٹا لیا گلے سے حسن اور حسین زینب نے بھائیوں کو کیا لاش سے جدا رو کر علی نے شب و شبیر سے کہا لو اب اٹھاؤ ماں کا جنازہ وسط بکا آئی صدا نہ دوائیں آئی صدا نہ دوائیں تکلیف مرت آئی صدا نہ دوئن تکلیف مرت یہ بوجھ تیرا احمد مرسل بٹائیں گے تابوت فاطمہ کا محمد اٹھائے تابوت فاطمہ کا محمد اٹھائیں گے مریم سے بھی بطول کو رتبہ سوا ملا محمد محمد صلوات
جزاک اللہ اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل
فرجہم. بہت بہت شکریہ جناب ہاشم رضا صاحب. اس سے پہلے کہ میں مولانا کو دعوت دوں 4 مصرے اور ہیں. ملاحظہ فرمائیے کہ محسن یہ چاند اسی لیے ہم کو عزیز ہے کیونکہ مہربان ہے بنت رسول پر. محسن یہ چاند اس لیے ہم کو عزیز ہے کیونکہ مہربان ہے بنت رسول پر. غربت کا ہوں یا اجر رسالت کا ہوں اسے غربت کا ہوں یا اجر رسالت کا ہوں اسے تنہا یہی چراغ ہے قبر بطول پر. ایک صلوات پڑھیے علی محمد و آل محمد.
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
And with that, I would like to request tonight for the lecture, our very own Maulana Rizwan Rizvi Sahab. Please welcome him with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل
Muhammad wa ajil
Allah. Before I begin, there's a request for Surah Fatiha for the families of Faisal Zaidi and Shariar Haider, who are the sponsors for tonight's virtual Majlis. And they request that you recite Surah Fatiha for the following marhumin: Syed Akhtar Hussain Zaidi, Ibn Syed Hamid Hussain Zaidi, and all marhumin of Faisal and Farwaz Zaidi. Please recite Surah Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وصلى على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد.
أما فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is the third and the last majlis in the series of majalis, tonight being the shab of the Shahadat of Bibi Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha. Once again, we send our condolences to Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, on this great tragedy, as well as our Maraje and Umum Mu'mineen and Mu'minat across the globe who are sharik in this commemoration tonight. While we are going through this difficult period and phase of Corona time, still we find that with the blessings of these Ayyam, you get to take part in Majalis Azad that you may not have been able to take part in other times. Now, inshallah, this period passes by us quickly and becomes a distant memory, inshallah, in short while, for the betterment of all of humanity, and as well, especially all of mu'mineen and mu'minat throughout the world. The way it has hampered many of our celebrations and commemorations, we hope and pray, because safety first, inshallah, if this goes away quickly enough, we get back to our normal practices. But even with that, if we are not able to do things in person, of course, there's more benefit of attending these programs, coming together in congregation, um, the ambience that it creates, being inside masjid and imam barga with fellow mu'mineen and mu'minat. Commemoration in that way definitely has its own virtues, and we all long for that. And indeed, by just coming for those couple of hours that you spend out of your houses inside a masjid or imam barga on these sad occasions, not only that it spiritually uplifts you, but of course you get to meet and socialize other fellow mu'mineen and mu'minat, share a meal with them, and all of those are the benefits that we are seeing ourselves being deprived of all of that. So therefore, I think after these days, difficult days will be over, I think mu'mineen should have a more of appreciation of the programs that are conducted inside our masajid and imam barga. Because in a year of deprivation, they should give you an incentive. They should tell you, and it should create this hunger and thirst and eagerness in you that you attend the local community centers with more enthusiasm. You go to the masajid with more enthusiasm, as you may not have been able to go in the past, or you took it for granted that, we'll just listen to it online, for example. I think this, if anything, we learned from this difficult phase of our lives, that should be the takeaway from it. Yes, I don't want to take too much time in this muqaddimah. I chose this ayat for these 3 nights. It's chapter number 3, Surah Al-Imran, ayat number 31. It's a famous ayat which I'm sure you've heard many times, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Holy Prophet by saying, "Qul, O Prophet, tell them, in kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni." If you claim that you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow me, follow my footsteps. Yuhbibkum Allah, Allah will love you. Wa yaghfir lakum dunubakum, and indeed Allah will forgive your sins. Wallahu ghafurur rahim. And indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all forgiving and all merciful. And a lot of time we might take these words that come toward the end of the ayat for granted, ghafurur rahim, halim, and all of these shakur and all those attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a purpose behind it. There's a sync and there's a connection that it has with the main ayat. Because the ayat is talking about ittibai Rasul, following the Prophet, which leads to the actualization of love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which then in turn becomes the reason for the forgiveness of your sins. There's a reminder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurur Rahim. Now take a moment and look beyond this ayah. That what is this ayah telling you, and what are we commemorating tonight? Tonight, as you heard in the Marsiyah, is the night of musibah for the household of Fatima Zahra. It's a night of musibah for Hassanain. It's a night of musibah for Zainab and Kulthum. And it is a night of musibah for Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fidda, Asma, and all of those people who are close to Janab Sayyida. and many of the companions. Keeping the perspective of what took place and what transpired and the reason behind all of the struggles of Janab Sayyidah, which I will take you back a little bit to complete last night's discussion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, if you love me, you follow my prophet. Now, will prophet ever give anyone permission to go ahead and attack the house in which his daughter lives, in which his grandsons live, the house where wahi came down, revelation came down, the house in which Rasulullah used to stand and besides it and used to say, Assalamu alaikum ya ahla bayt al-nubuwwah? And then will these people be turning around and asking for the maghfirat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where did you follow the footsteps of Rasulullah? If you were following the footsteps of Rasulullah, you would have revered this personality, not attack her house. If you were following the footsteps of Rasulullah, you would have given her what she was asking for and not deprive her of that. And in turn, do you ask for the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you claim that you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? All of this could be derived from this ayah. If you remember last night's discussion where we touched briefly upon the fadak and we gave a brief understanding of it so that we have the correct facts in front of us. We concluded by giving those ayat that Janab Sayyidah had recited. In front of those ayat, Khalifa Awwal had recited a hadith which says, Nahnu ma'ashirul anbiya la nuwarith. We, the group of anbiya, we do not leave anything in inheritance. Anything that we leave is sadaqah. And this was the basis of his argument. If you remember, if this hadith is correct, first of all, can it be upheld against the ayat of Quran, the nas of Quran, which says that make sure that you leave inheritance for your children? The share of the male children is this much and the share of the female children is this much. That ayat of Surah Nisa. Or those ayat where specifically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, explicitly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering his anbiya and they're saying, they're making this dua that they may have inheritors and heirs. So first of all, ayat cannot be abrogated in front of a hadith. Hadith cannot come and go ahead and abrogate an ayah or change the matlab and the mafhum of the ayah, which is again is khilaf qaida. Then there is a contradiction in the action of the first Khalifa. If the ayah, if the hadith is for some reason so strong that it cancels out or gives some sort of exception to the rule. The rule was that prophets inherited from other prophets. Gave the example of Dawood and Sulaiman alayhim salatu wasalam, example of Zakaria and Yahya alayhim salatu wasalam. And then the ayat in general, which spoke about the wirasat, that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordering that wirasat is something that you leave, make sure that you stipulate, and the share of the male children and the female children is this much, and so on and so forth. So in case this hadith is so strong that it challenges these ayat, first of all, that has to be proven. But let's just hypothetically speaking, address and accept this fact. That yes, this hadith is challenging this ayah, and there's this istisna, there's this exception that could be derived in the case of Rasulullah. That Rasulullah is different from all of the other Anbiya. Rasulullah is not leaving this for another, for example, Nabi after him. Rather, this is his children, and so on and so forth. Let's say there's an exception, which is very far-fetched. Even then, there's a contradiction in the action of the first Khalifa. Why? Imam Ali's istidlal, if you remember. Imam said, if Zayd, just given a name, if Zayd has money in his hands, and if I, Ali, claim that it is mine, and we come to you for qadawat and judgment, who would you ask for witness? Abu Bakr said, of course I'll ask you, because you don't have that money in your hand. Zayd has that money in his hand. So whoever has it in their hand, you don't ask them for the witness, you ask the one who's claiming it. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, then how can you ask Fatima to produce witnesses while she was in control of this fadak? Second, if this hadith is correct, then why, and pay attention to this very important point, that if this hadith upholds and challenges the ayat of Quran, then why only confiscate fadak and not every single belonging of Rasulullah that he left behind and consider that to be part of the government? Why only take fadak away, saying that Rasul and Anbiya do not leave anything in Virathat, and leave everything else intact the way it was given to the heirs? While there isn't a single tradition that states that Prophet's libas, of course he left behind his clothes, right? His armor, his sword, the riding animals that he used, the domestic animals that they had in their houses for, milk and other things, were they also confiscated by the government? There's not a single mention of that. Moreover, all the rooms where the wives of the Prophet resided remain in the possession of the wives. Well, of course, you're not going to remove them from their houses. That would not be nice. But in fact, if anything, there might be a hadith which says that these rooms now, the hujurat that Prophet had for all of his wives, were now under the protection or under the control of the government. And those people residing in them do not have any control over them. There's not a single mention of that. In fact, upon his death, prior to passing away, the first Khalifa sought the permission from his daughter to be buried next to Rasulullah, because Rasulullah was buried in his house, in his room. And so he was asking for the permission from his daughter. If the hadith, نَحْنُ مَعَاشِرُ الْأَنْبِيَاء لَا نُوَرَّث, was true, then this room where Prophet was buried would have been the property of the government, and he did not need any permission to be buried over there. So hence we deduce from all of these points that hadith was very weak, which was chosen to counter the ayat of Quran and these dalail and these proofs and these evidences. Going back to the ayah, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Regarding the elevated maqam of Rasulullah and his obedience, we read elsewhere in Quran, because it's talking about the ittiba of Rasul. Other places in Quran, it also says, مَن يُطِعَ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys Rasul indeed obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if Allah is not behind it, then people can go ahead and make arguments. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that there's authority behind Rasulullah, and that is Allah himself. So whoever obeys Prophet has indeed obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is the apparent meaning of the ayat. We are always taught to look at the mafhum and the mantuq of the ayat, the apparent and the implied meaning of the ayat. So whoever obeys Prophet has indeed obeyed Allah, which tells you what in return? Whoever disobeyed Rasulullah has indeed disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at another place in Quran, it says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُبَايِعُونَكَ إِنَّمَا يُبَايِعُونَ اللَّهِ. Indeed, those who swear allegiance to you, O Prophet, swear allegiance to only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to that extent, ittiba' Rasul is not out of, because you knew Rasulullah, he was a good man, he taught you good things, and he brought this religion. No, it is a matter which is shar'an obligatory upon you, because his ata'at is ata'at of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His bay'at is the bay'at from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person asked Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam that we name our kids after your names. This is another one of the issues which we find in our communities, unfortunately, when it comes to naming our children. We've spoken about that majlis where we talked about the 9 names of Janab Fatima Zahra. Every single one of those names near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How mahbub those names are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Choose those names for your daughters. even if they are repeated, does not matter. Remember the time when Amir Sham had this grudge and he deprived and he showed people that, Ahl Bayt are, for example, he alienated them and he showed their faces to be someone who are the enemies of Islam. That's why people from Sham used to curse Ahl Bayt. They were brought up. And for that period, he did not allow anyone to name their children Ali and Fatima. And that's why Imam Hussein والسلام, named all of his male kids to be Ali and named all of his female children to be Fatima. So you have Fatima Kubra, you have Fatima Sughra, you have Ali Akbar, you have Ali Asghar. These were the names that Imam والسلام, had chosen. And when someone asked, did you not find any other names? Imam said that if I had 100 children, I would have named them all Ali, because that was the need of the time. So therefore, don't become that, we have to follow the trend and we need to name our kids in a way so that, it's not clearly showing that we are associated. No, let them. And then we choose these names which do not have any worth or value sometimes. We choose names, saying just because the word has appeared in Quran, Maulana, the word is in Quran, so we can go ahead and name our kids after that because this is in Quran. Well, everything is Quran should not be named after your kids. The name of Abu Lahab has appeared in Quran. Are you going to go ahead and name your kids after that? The love shaitan is in Quran. I believe the word Iblis might also be in Quran. So you're going to go ahead and name your kids because merely the fact that it is a word in Quran? No, you won't. So use some, do some tadabbur, contemplate. So this person said to Imam Jafar Sadiq that we name our kids after your names and the names of your forefathers. Is there any benefit in it for us? You know what Imam did? Imam recited this ayat. In kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni. Meaning what? Absolutely there's benefit in it. And Imam recited this ayat to prove what? That if you were to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will follow us. Follow us in what? Even naming your children, you will follow us. Not just, you should follow us, of course, in your actions more so, that you don't go and become astray and you don't lose the path. That is definitely known. But even when it comes to naming, Imam recited this ayat, in kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni. Follow Prophet and his progeny, even to the extent by naming them. So claims are merely claims until shown through the action. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this condition of fattabi'uni, follow me. Part of belief upon Allah is obedience to his awliya, those whom he has sent for our guidance. Anyone who is lazy in his or her actions, in reality is slow in his love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. That person is also considered to be lazy as far as their love is concerned for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when trying to bring a reform in the society, use the method of sympathy and affection. You cannot bring reform in the society through a sword. And that's what our Turre Imtiyaz, vain glory, is, that Islam in the times of Rasulullah did not spread because of sword or wealth. Rather, Islam spread because of sympathy and affection. People came in. And therefore, based on this concept of love, one of our contemporary Maraje, Atullah Jawadi Amuli, Hafazahullah, he says, when it is said that Allah loves those who put trust in him, or those who act justly with others, so those who put trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and those who act justly with other people, in reality, he loves the quality of trust itself, loves the quality of justice and righteousness. When people deal with each other with trust, with justice, with righteousness, Allah loves these qualities. Hence, he loves the possessor of these qualities as well. The love for those who possess these virtues is intrinsic then. If Allah is affectionate towards someone, his actions will be Allah's actions. His words will be Allah's words. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala propagates adl. Allah propagates righteousness. Allah propagates, trustworthiness. And all of these are the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and traits of Allah will manifest in this person. That's why we have this tradition which says, وَمَا يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ عَبْدٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِي بِشَيْءٍ أَحَبَّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّنْ افْتَرَضْتُ عَلَيْهِ. That a person does not come close to me. Nothing brings one closer to me other than performing what I have obliged this person to do. So that which has become an obligation. So first and foremost, those things which are wajib upon you, what are they doing? They're bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you make the niyat of what? Qurbatan ilallah. To seek nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, وَإِنَّهُ لَيَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّافِلَةِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ كُنْتُ إِذًا سَمْعُهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ وَبَصَرُهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ وَلِسَانُهُ الَّذِي يَنْطِقُ بِهِ وَيَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا إِنْ دَعَانِي أَجَبْتُهُ وَإِنْ سَأَلَنِي أَعْطَيْتُهُ. Beautiful hadith. I recited the entire thing so that I can translate together so you'll enjoy the translation of this hadith. So nothing brings one closer to me other than performing what I have obliged this person to do. So the obligations, your wajibat that you have to perform on a daily basis, that brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he continues to draw nearer to me through what? Mustahab amal that I have given to him. And if he ever reaches a point where I truly love him by doing all of these things, by performing the wajibat and by performing the mustahab. First of all, don't limit the wajibat to just namaz, roza, hajj, zakat, khums, amr ma'ruf, nahy anil munkar, and all those things. Because there are other wajibat in Quran as well. قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. The command to love Ahlul Bayt is an amr, is a command, is an obligation. So don't count that out of the namaz and the roza and the hajj and all those things. It's right there. In fact, it is above all of those. So keeping that in mind, that you can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, through mustahab actions as well, until I love him. If he ever reaches a point where I truly love him, I will become his tongue that he speaks with out of my special grace. I will become his sight in which he sees with out of my special grace. It is on this basis that the speech of the believer who is loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes like it is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And that's why when we say that Ali ibn Abi Talib is Wajhullah, Lisanullah, Ainullah, people have hard time believing, saying it is shirk, it is exaggeration. No, it says when you perform your obligations and even on top of that you perform the mustahabbat, and if you get to that level where Allah returns this love to you, then you become the eyes, you become the hearing, and you become the sight, and you become, all of your actions become the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't consider when we call and ziyarat mention that Ali is Wajhullah, Lisanullah, wa Ainullah, and so on and so forth, all of these things that are mentioned for Ali ibn Abi Talib. So when you understand this concept of love that is being mentioned over here, in kuntum tuhibbun Allah fattabi'uni. So the love of Allah depends on the ittiba of Rasul. Ittiba of Rasul is either through his tongue or through his actions. What Rasul did, we do, and we will attain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What Rasul said, we do, we will attain the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now let me recite this hadith, which you have heard a great deal of time. When this muqaddimah, this preface, this prelude has been established in your minds, and I'll repeat it one more time, that قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. Ittiba of Rasul through his kalam, ittiba of Rasul through his actions, ittiba of Rasul through everything else through which you can derive. For example, someone did an action and Rasulullah remained silent upon it. Those are all fall under the category of following Rasulullah, which is called taqreerul imam. So when all of that is there, let me recite this hadith for you. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم فاطمة بدعة مني فمن آذاها فقد آذاني ومن أحبها فقد أحبني. Fatima is part of me. Whoever harms her harms me, and whoever loves her loves me. So Rasulullah is demanding love for Fatima to Zahra by throwing fire at the house of Fatima. You do not love Fatima to Zahra. By breaking the door of Fatima to Zahra, you do not love Fatima to Zahra. None of those actions could be translated as love for Fatima to Zahra. And Rasulullah said, وَمَنْ أَحَبَّهَا فَقَدْ أَحَبَّنِي. And whoever loves me, indeed loves, whoever loves her, indeed loves me. And whoever harms her, indeed harms me. And therefore, go back to this ayah, إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. Therefore, if you don't love Rasul, if you don't love Fatima, you don't love Rasul, you don't love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where we understand the concept of love is really manifested, because Fatima Zahra is someone who's very difficult for us to understand. At least people like us who are engulfed into masiyat. It is very difficult for us to see with clarity Fatima Zahra. A simple example is that if we, if the vessel is polluted, if no matter how pure the water that you pour into this vessel, the water will be what? Polluted as well. If there's already pollution in the vessel and you're pouring water in it, first you have to wash the vessel and then you pour water in it. If you are wearing goggles and you're unable to see clearly with the picture that you want to look at, no matter how beautiful the manzar is and the scene is in front of you, you will not be able to appreciate the beauty of it because your eyes have veils in front of it. And these veils are caused by our actions, our zulm towards others, and our sins. These two become impediment in us clearly seeing things. And therefore, don't think that zulm, whenever we hear the word zulm is associated with people like Saddam. Zulm is associated with people like Yazid. Zulm is associated with these individuals. No. Look for zalimeen amongst ourselves. That if we are doing zulm to our subordinate, those who are under us, if we are doing zulm to them, then we are in this category as well. And if there's little bit amount of zulm in us, injustice in us, then we won't be able to understand and comprehend these personalities. In some narrations, you find Shab Qadr is interpreted as Fatima Zahra, based on the word Ma Adraka, means that Fatima Zahra is also unrecognized. You read what you said, that Surah Qadr, the way you recited, that inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr wa ma adraka ma laylatul qadr. Wa ma adraka ma laylatul qadr. Fatima Zahra is compared with wa ma adraka laylatul qadr. So we can't recognize her either. But this ayat, like all the ayat, are revealed on Prophet. And so it's saying to the Prophet that, oh Prophet, that we reveal this Quran on the night of Qadr. And وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. And what do you know? What is Laylatul Qadr? So does that mean that even Rasulullah did not recognize Fatima Zahra? Anyone who recognizes the night of Qadr then will recognize Fatima Zahra. That's one way of looking at it. So Rasulullah recognized Laylatul Qadr, so therefore he recognizes Fatima Zahra. When it says in Quran, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ, to the Prophet, does that mean that he was unable to recognize Fatima Zahra? There are some questions about it. In order to understand this phenomena, we must realize that the word ma adraka doesn't necessarily mean not knowing or not recognizing. Rather, it is pointing towards the azamat and the magnificence and the greatness of the night. Similarly, the ayat وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ doesn't mean that Prophet cannot comprehend this night. Rather, the magnificence of this night, which is being highlighted over here. And also, on top of that, many linguistics translate the word ma in ma adraka in the verse for istifham, interrogation, and not for nafiya, negation. It changes the meaning. If you say Laylatul Qadr, wa ma adraka ma Laylatul Qadr, that you do not know what Laylatul Qadr is, or meaning when a person questions out of surprise, astonishment, not out of ignorance, rather out of surprise. You see something, say, what is this? You know what it is, but you question out of surprise. Therefore, the answer is given in the very next ayah. Laylatul Qadr khayrum min alfi shahr. That the night of Qadr is superior to 1,000 months. So about the connection between Shab-e Qadr and Fatmatul Zahra, we can say this. إنما سميت فاطمة لأن الخلق فتموا عن معرفتها. That she is named Fatima because the creation is cut off, futimu, from understanding the depths of her existence. It is hidden for them. There's no way for them to get and comprehend, just like Shab-e Qadr. Many of us make an effort to be present in the place of worship, in the masjid, to spend this night. Many of us get the opportunity to shed a few tears, burn all of our sins away because it's a great night. But many of us come in the same way and leave the same way. There isn't any impact upon us. And then there's some of us who don't even bother coming, or forget coming, I'm just using the word coming, but they don't even bother getting up at night or on the night of Qadr and doing any of the ibadat. They just don't bother with it because they haven't really understood the importance of it. So there are different types of people, right? There's one who doesn't bother, and I'm not talking about non-Muslims over here. I'm talking about Muslims. There's a person who doesn't even bother doing ibadat on Shab-e Qadr. There's a person who makes an effort to come but barely does any ibadat. And then there are people who are able to shed tears and burn their sins away. So just like Shab-e Qadr, not everyone is able to comprehend it, but Prophet and Ahl Bayt who comprehend Shab-e Qadr, they comprehend Fatmatul Zahra as well. Therefore, the above narrations don't mean that no one can understand Fatima. Rather, insani kamil, a perfect being, can understand another perfect being. That was the reason it was said that if it wasn't for the wujud of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Fatmatul Zahra would have remained unmarried. Why? Because she's a ma'asuma. And a ma'asuma cannot marry anyone aside from a ma'asum. One of the reasons why Janab Maryam, salamullahi alayha, could not marry anyone, although there was Hazrat Zakaria who was already married, and he could not have married Janab Maryam, and Hazrat Yahya who was very young. So Janab Maryam remained unmarried because there was not any kufr. And the kufr could only be compatibility, could only come from another ma'asum. So a insani kamil, a perfect being, can understand other perfect beings, just like Rasulullah is above all perfect beings, so he can definitely understand Fatmatul Zahra. That's why Prophet taught Fatima this tasbih. Don't leave the musalla without it. You see, a lot of time we try to teach this to our kids from the very young age to learn how to recite the tasbih. Don't underestimate the power of this tasbih. Riwayat are so particular about it that when you're praying, don't even change your position. When you do tashahhud and salam, the position that you are in, within that position, after you have finished your salam, pick up the tasbih and recite the tasbih within that position. Don't even change your position. And I'll tell you why. Allah doesn't like the person who fails to make dua after namaz. Allah does not like it. Riwayah says that a person thought that I am worthy of sajda, but I'm not worthy of him asking me for his hajat. So you thought I'm worthy of sajda. Even shaitan thought I was worthy of sajda. But you don't ask for hajat from me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is upset and angry from a person who doesn't pray after salat. And then Masumin emphasized that the best action post namaz is this tasbih Fatmatul Zahra. Benefits. Just a couple of benefits before I move forward. It gives protection from becoming stern-hearted. See, there are a relationship to all of these actions. Our sixth Imam said, Ya Aba Harun, inna na'muru sibyanana bit tasbih Fatima. Kama na'muruhum bis salat. فَالْزِمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ لَمْ جَلْزِمْهُ عَبْدٌ شَقِيٌّ. Oh, when Imam is addressing this person, Aba Harun, he said, we order our children for the tasbih of Fatima Zahra. Order. Na'mur, from amr. Kama na'muruhum bis salat. The way we order them to go ahead and pray. The obligation of salat, one place, and tasbih in one place. But Imam is putting both in the same line. Falzimhu, make sure that you perform it. The word na'mur had already given the emphasis. But then Imam added by saying falzimhu. Make it ilzami upon yourself. Make it incumbent upon yourself. فَإِنَّهُ لَمْ يَلْزِمْهُ عَبْدٌ شَقِيٌّ. The only person who does not carry out this greatest deed is person who's abdun shaqi', one who's stern-hearted. This tasbih Fatima Zahra softens your heart. Why? Because it keeps shaitan away. Fifth Imam added, he said, Man sabbaha tasbih Fatima, thumma astaghfara, ghufira lahu. Whoever does the tasbih of Fatima, and then the istighfar, because you say Allahu Akbar, you say Alhamdulillah, you say Subhanallah, and then one time La ilaha illallah, ghufira lahu. That person is maghfur, is forgiven. وَهِيَ مِئَةٌ بِاللِّسَانِ. Tasbih is saying things 100 times. Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah. وَأَلْفٌ فِي الْمِيزَانِ. You are only saying it 100 times, but on the mizan, on the day of judgment, it is worth thousands and thousands of rewards. وَيَطْرُدُ الشَّيْطَانِ وَيُرْضَ الرَّحْمَنِ. Two more effects of this tasbih is that it turns the shaitan away, gives you deterrence against shaitan, and with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rahman, his razayat is attained. He becomes razi with the performance of this action. So as I said before, that man sabbaha, don't even move qabla an yuthanna rajulay. Before this person moves his, or changes the position, min salat al-farida, ghafirullahu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives him. So perform this tasbih Fatima Zahra right after, before doing anything else, perform this tasbih Fatima Zahra. There are many aspects of the life of Janab al-Sayyidah, which of course cannot be highlighted in merely 3 majalis, but this is where we get the opportunity to commemorate the wiladat and the shahadat all throughout the year. And it does not really require that a particular day, which is the shahadat, that only then we talk about Fatima Zahra. A particular day, which is the wiladat, that we talk about Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha. Rather, this dhikr should be done all throughout the year, based on authentic narrations. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib buried Fatima Zahra at night. I will recite towards the end some of the wasaya of Janab al-Sayyidah. He buried her at night, hidden from the eyes of the public, with only a few close companions whose names I will mention later. This was one action that Imam ﷺ did, or one of the actions that Imam did, exactly how Janab al-Sayyidah wanted it to be done. And this was done following the will of Bibi Fatima. There are certain historical references that allude to the fact that some people became angry with this action of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they threatened to go ahead and exhume the grave of Fatima Zahra, to dig the grave and exhume it. The day after her burial, when the news spread throughout Medina that Fatima Zahra has passed away, Muslims in general became aware of her shahadat. They went towards the graveyard of Baqi and found 40 new graves recently dug up. 40 graves. And couldn't tell which one was of Fatima Zahra. So that was one difficulty, that if Imam Ali had only dug up one grave, then it would be easy for them to identify. But he made sure that he did 40 so that they would have difficult time. What, are they going to go ahead and exhume every single one of these? People started weeping, started blaming one another, that the beloved daughter of Rasulullah died and we didn't even attend her janazah. We didn't get to perform Salatul Mayyit upon her. We weren't even present to bury her. Some of the elderly suggested, call the women of the community here, ask them to dig the grave and exhume the body so that we can go ahead and offer Salatul Janazah. Yes, There are historical events that in history that talk about this. Just imagine. When Imam Ali heard this, he became aware of this plot. He became furious. He grabbed his Zulfiqar. He went to Baqi and he said, by God, if anyone removes one stone from these graves, I will fight till the last breath. And I will not spare any single one of you. Second caliph was also there. He said, oh Ali, what have you done? Why did you deprive us? And then he hinted toward the same thing, opening all the graves. Imam Ali said, the only reason I didn't raise my sword when my right was usurped is because I was afraid of fitna in community. Lest people leave their deen. By God, the one in whose hands Ali's nafs is, if anyone looked at these graves with bad intentions, I will spill their blood. And so people understood that Ali is not, saying this because of his jazbat and because of his emotions. No, Ali is true in what he's saying. Why is Imam Ali preventing them? Reason why exhuming the grave was not permitted. There are many reasons. One, it's haram. Clearly, if these people know the Shariat, that tells you their limited knowledge about Shariat of Islam. That too, which is just recently received from Rasulullah. It's not that hundreds of years have passed, so people have confusion whether this is halal or that is halal. People have confusion about halal and haram. No, Rasulullah just left this world. This source of knowledge who taught you all of these things just recently departed. And still people have a hard time remembering that exhuming a grave is haram. So that's one of the reasons why Imam Ali did not permit. Second, wasiyat of Janab Sayyidah, to be buried in this way, in the darkness of the night, without allowing these people. So Imam Ali would have to retract from that wasiyat of Janab Sayyidah. Number three, Imam raised his sword because Islam was not a danger if Ali raises his sword at this moment. If Ali had raised his sword against his right being usurped, then Islam was in danger. And he remembered the wasiyat of Rasulullah. But here, it's his family matter. So he raises the sword. And number four, keeping them from desecrating the graves. Who would have thought, just like today, how the Wahhabis have raised the graves of Imams in Baqi, there was a probability and a possibility same would be done with the grave of Janab Sayyidah. Imam Ali made sure that none of that was happening. He made sure that they would not be able to get their hands. So therefore, this was the strong stance of Ali ibn Abi Talib when it came to the grave of Fatima Zahra. Janab Sayyidah, before leaving, he left some of the wasaya. And then one of the wasiyat of Janab Sayyidah is that, oh Ali, remember me. Don't forget me. Ya Abul Hasan, lam yabqa li illa ramaqun min al-hayat. There's nothing remaining in my life except a few breaths. Wahana zaman rahil. And time has come that I must go. Fastami' kalami. Listen to what I have to say. فَإِنَّكَ لَا تَسْمَعُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ صَوْتَ الْفَاطِمَةِ. Because after this, you will not hear Sawt of Fatima. You will not hear the voice of Fatima. Abadan. Usika ya Abul Hasan, la tansani, batazurani ba'da mamati. I give you this wasiyat, O Abul Hasan, that don't forget me and make sure that you visit me after my death. Ajrukum Allah. Look at the wasiyat of Janab Sayyidah. She made another wasiyat saying that make sure that you recite the Quran on my grave. That's why we learn this sabaq, that we recite Surah Yasin. We recite different surahs of Quran when we go to the graves of our own marhumin. Janab Sayyidah gave this wasiyat. She said, إِذَا أَنَا مِتُّ فَتَوَلَّ عَنْتَ غُسْلِي وَجَهِّزْنِي وَصَلِّ عَلَيَّ وَأَنزِلْنِي قَبْرِي وَأَلْحِدْنِي وَصَلِّ when I die, O Ali, you are responsible for my ghusl, for my tajheez, my takfeen, for the salat. Oh Ali, you are the one who's going to bring me down inside the grave. You will put me into my lahad. Oh Ali, you will be the one putting the turab and sand upon me. And then she said, wajlis inda ra'asi qibalat wajhi, sit next to me upon my head. And then fa'akthir min tilawati wa du'a, and continuously recite Quran and continuously recite the dua. Why? فَإِنَّهَا سَاعَةٌ يَحْتَاجُ الْمَيَّتُ فِيهَا إِلَىٰ أُنْسِ الْأَحْيَاءِ وَأَنَا. And this is what she said, because that's the time when the mayyat is in need of this uns. Mayyat is in need of all of that. She also made a wasiyat, who to marry after me. Jazakallahu anni khair al-jaza, yabna am. Oh, son of my, be giving him the title that you are son of my uncle. Oh, yabna am Rasulullah, son of uncle of Rasulullah. Usika awwalan, my first wasiyat is an tatazawwaja ba'di bi ibnati ukhti Amama, that I give you wasiyat to marry Amama after I die. Fa innaha takunu li waladi mithli, because she will treat my children like her own children. Fa inna ar-rijal la budda lahum min an-nisa. So Janab Sayyida gave that wasiyah to Ali ibn Abi Talib as far as who to marry afterwards. And then she said, oh Ali, idha tawaffaytu, when I die, la tu'lim illa, don't inform anyone of that except Salma, except you inform Salma. Yes, she served as my mother. She took care of us. She was very gentle and generous with us. Wa Ayman wa Fidda, اور یہ these were the three women. ان تین خواتین کو بتا دینا علی, سلمہ کو, ایمن کو, فضہ کو. ومن الرجال, اور مردوں میں ابنیہ, میرے بچوں کو, والعباس وسلمان وعمار والمقدار وابا ذر وحذیفہ, ولا تدفنی الا لیلا ولا تعلن قبری احدا, مجھے رات کے اندھیرے میں دفن کرنا اور کسی کو میرے قبر کے بارے میں نہ بتانا. جناب سیدہ کی اور بھی وصیتیں ہیں, مگر اختتام جناب سیدہ پہ وہ وقت آیا, اب کچھ رمق باقی نہیں ہے. ایک دفعہ علی آتے ہیں, جب سارے کام انجام دے لیے, اپنے بچوں کو بلایا, آؤ بچوں سیدہ سے ودا کرو. ایک دفعہ بچے آ گئے لیکن نہیں آئے تو حسین کہا, ہے بیٹا حسین حلما, آؤ اپنی مادر گرامی سے ودا کرو. جب نہیں آئے تو پوچھا کیوں نہیں آتے, کہا میں جب تک نہیں آؤں گا جب تک میری مادر گرامی مجھے ویسے نہیں بلاتی جیسے بلایا کرتی تھی. مشیت الہی سے بندے کفن کھلے, دو ہاتھ بلند ہوئے, بنیا بنیا اے حسین میرے پاس آ جا. الا لعنت اللہ القوم الظالمین وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسین.
گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی, گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی. مولا کائنات سے زہرا جدا ہوئی, گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی. زہرا کو ایک پل بھی سکون کا نہ مل سکا, زہرا کو ایک پل بھی سکون کا نہ مل سکا. باد رسول اس پہ وہ جور و جفا ہوئی, گھر گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی، حسنین بھی اداس ہیں، حیدر بھی ہے ملول، حسنین بھی اداس ہیں، حیدر بھی ہے ملول، کعبے کے بام و در پہ جو رونق تھی کیا ہوئی، گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی، زینب کے سر پہ سایہ زہرا نہیں رہا، زینب کے سر پہ سایہ زہرا نہیں رہا، بیٹی ابھی سے دہر میں کیا بیردہ ہوئی، گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی، محسن شہید ہو گئے در اس طرح گرا، محسن شہید ہو گئے در اس طرح گرا، یہاں کربلا سے پہلے ہی ایک کربلا ہوئی، گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی، جس کا جنازہ اٹھا ہے تاریک رات میں، جس کا جنازہ اٹھا ہے تاریک رات میں، دن میں اسی کی لخت جگر بیردہ ہوئی، گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی، مولا کا گھر اجڑ گیا زہرا گزر گئی، مولا کا گھر اجڑ گیا زہرا گزر گئی، اختر نہ پوچھ کیسی قیامت بپا ہوئی، گھر سے علی کے رخصت خیر النساء ہوئی،
سیدہ طاہرہ سیدہ طاہرہ حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا بابا تیرے وطن میں، حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا بابا تیرے وطن میں، پردیسیوں کی طرح ہے، پردیسیوں کی طرح رہتی ہے اب یہ دکھیا، بابا تیرے وطن میں، اب لوگ فاطمہ کو پہچانتے نہیں ہیں، میں آپ کی ہوں بیٹی یہ مانتے نہیں ہے، کوئی نہیں ہے میرا ہے، کوئی نہیں ہے میرا، میں رہ گئی ہوں تنہا، بابا تیرے وطن میں حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا، بابا تیرے وطن میں میں بھی کھڑی ہوئی تھی، حسنین بھی کھڑے تھے، مسجد میں میری جانب سب لوگ دیکھتے تھے، یہ زخم نہ بھرے گا ہے، یہ زخم نہ بھرے گا، کوئی نہ گھر سے نکلا، بابا تیرے وطن میں حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا، بابا تیرے وطن میں غم یہ نہیں ہے مجھ کو، دروازہ جل گیا ہے، اس سے بڑا ستم تو زہرا پہ یہ ہوا ہے، در جل رہا تھا میرا ہے، در جل رہا تھا میرا، کوئی نہ گھر سے نکلا، بابا تیرے وطن میں حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا، بابا تیرے وطن میں کوئی سلام آ کر کرتا نہیں تھا پہلے، اب تو جواب دینا لازم نہیں سمجھتے، ہر شخص بھول بیٹھا ہے، ہر شخص بھول بیٹھا رتبہ ابوالحسن کا، بابا تیرے وطن میں حق مانگتی ہے زہرا، مجمع ہے باغیوں کا، بابا تیرے وطن میں یا حسین.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا خيرة الله، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا ممتحنا، امتحنك الله الذي خلقك قبل أن يخلقك فوجدك لما امتحنك صابرة، وزعمنا إن لك أولياء ومصدقون وصابرون لكل ما أتانا به أبوك صلى الله عليه وآله وأتى به وصيه، فإن نسألك إن كنا صدقناك إلا ألحقتنا بتصديقنا لهما، لنبشر أنفسنا بأننا قد طهرنا بولايتك. السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله، السلام عليك يا بنت نبي الله، السلام عليك يا بنت حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا بنت خليل الله، السلام عليك يا بنت صفي الله، السلام عليك يا بنت أمين الله، السلام عليك يا بنت خير خلق الله. السلام عليك يا بنت أفضل أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته. السلام عليك يا بنت خير البرية. السلام عليك يا سيدة نساء العالمين من الأولين والآخرين وخير الخلق بعد رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أم الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. السلام عليك أيتها الصديقة الشهيدة. السلام عليك أيتها الرضية المرضية. السلام عليك أيتها الفاضلة الزكية. السلام عليك أيتها الحوراء الإنسية. السلام عليك أيتها تقية النقية. السلام عليك أيتها المحدثة العليمة. السلام عليك أيتها المظلومة المغصوبة. السلام عليك أيتها المضطهدة المقهورة. السلام عليك يا فاطمة بنت رسول الله ورحمة الله وبركاته صلى الله عليك وعلى روحك وبدنك. يشهد أنك مضيت على بينة من ربك، وأن من سرك فقد سر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، ومن جفاك فقد جفا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، ومن آذاك فقد آذى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، ومن وصلك فقد وصل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، ومن قتاك فقد قتى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله، لأنك بضعة منه وروحه الذي بين جنبيه. أشهد الله ورسله وملائكته والني راد عمن رديت عنه، ساخط على من سخطت عليه، متبرئ ممن تبرأت منه، موال لمن واليت، معاد لمن عاديت، مبغض لمن أبغضت، محب لمن أحببت، وكفى بالله شهيدا وحسيبا وجازيا ومثيبا. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. السلام عليك. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس وأنيس النفوس أيها المدفون بعد توسلي ابن مصر الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك صاحب الأسر والزمان. السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أعوانك وانصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.